Well, Rose University will today continue its commemoration program for Kensani Maseko. The third-year Bachelor of Arts student passed away on Friday after reporting a rape case against her boyfriend. Yesterday, the university suspended all classes in tribute to her. Today, there will be a march to Etler's Monument where Maseko would have graduated. A series of talks on sexual consent will be discussed as part of efforts to raise awareness on rape. The institution has also issued a notice to suspend Maseko's alleged rapist. Flags at the university have been lowered and will continue flying at half-mast until Maseko's burial, which is set for Thursday. All right, for more on this, we are joined in studio by clinical psychologist Anthony Townsend, as well as Tears Foundation Mara Glennie. Both of you, thank you for joining us. It's a sad state of affairs, it's a sad issue, but we're hoping we could derive some positives from this. We'll start with you, Anthony. Talk to us about how you could perhaps, give some positive information for our viewers out there on situations like this.
I think it's important to understand that while we're seeing different forms of gender-based violence, rape being predominant amongst them, on the rise, we're noting a rise of 53% in terms of the last year, and even with murder rates going up 117%. As much as these are on the rise, we're also seeing preventative efforts and treatment efforts being upscaled throughout South Africa, and I think that's a positive message to uphold, is that while we're seeing an increase in these sorts of offences, we're also seeing an increase in attempts to actually curb them and create a safer, better society for all of us at the same time.
Okay, and Mara, your organization, tell us about your organization.
We help rape and abuse victims get better. I'm a survivor myself. I was very severely abused, so I know the emotions that people feel. Obviously, you can't counsel from that point of view, but you can have a heartfelt understanding of the situation. So what we do is we receive about 40,000 calls per annum, and we direct these people to the places where they can get the best counseling in their areas.
So, in retrospect, what could Kensani Maseko have done? What should she have done to perhaps avoid suicide?
I think our biggest difficulty is that most abuses and rapes do take part from somebody that you know. Somebody normally you trust, the next door neighbor, your husband. And one of the things people don't understand, just as an aside, that you can even have rape in marriage because it's your body. You have the right to say no. So the difficulty is that for me, we have different levels that we are not addressing. First of all, it's the culture of rape. We are not teaching our children correctly. We need to teach our girls what's not acceptable, and boys not what to do. So if we start off that we have an uneducated society, that looks at one section of the difficulty. The second is we don't have a society that cares for the survivor of abuse or rape. You don't get the support you need. And then finally, going through the counselling, you really need someone who understands what rape is about. You can't have a counsellor who deals with animal abuse, yes. dealing with that. So okay. I think we are under-resourced and we are under-caring.
So, Mara, now this issue we had the issue of the boyfriend raping this young lady. How do you handle that? And there's a thin line there where the boyfriend can say he didn't think he was raping her. How do you respond to that? And Anthony, I'll let you go into the psychology of it, because it's very important that men understand that no means no, and that communication needs to be out there.
I think the big difficulty is that we still have huge vestiges of patriarchal society. And the whole of our society is structured, whether it be religious organizations or governmental organizations, they're all led by men. And so we have, and I'm not anti-men, I have a boyfriend and I'm proud of that, but I'm anti-rape and abuse. And so to be clear, when I say that, unfortunately, he had a right to her body. He had a right to take what he wanted, so he took it. The fact is he didn't have a right, he was misguided. It was his arrogance and because rape is not about lust. Rape is about control. He couldn't get what he wants, so he took it. And that is in most of the cases of rape and abuse, that the perpetrator takes what he or she wants without thinking of the consequences. Because unfortunately, rape and abuse stay with you your whole life. You never lose it. I'm a survivor of almost 20 years, and I've never lost it. I've thrived, I've gone over it, but you have to heal first. So part of her journey is to learn that it wasn't her fault for loving him.
Anthony, please jump in.
It's very important that we do understand that 46% of cases of rape in South Africa are committed by intimate partners. And this is a huge phenomenon, because what we do understand is that for the victims themselves, they can also have a problem trying to identify their intimate partner as a rapist. There's a natural reluctance to want to do so. And unfortunately, we can often see the internalization of victim-blaming attitudes by the victim. They start to worry, was it my fault? Was I responsible? And as Mara rightly points out, there's never a victim's responsibility that they suffered a rape. It's very important, because this can often lead victims to prevent themselves from reporting, from taking action in their own recovery, and from allowing themselves to experience justice from outside parties, support from friends and families, and it can ultimately hinder their progress and their recovery. And it's crucial that we start to break down those attitudes, that a victim is ever the reason or responsible party for their own suffering. And we also need to start educating men to understand that offenders are never justified in their actions when it comes to perpetrating rape against non-consenting partners or victims.
Psychologically, in such an incident, how can both parties heal, especially if the man feels remorse? What can he do? What steps can he take to start getting on the right path mentally and emotionally?
Absolutely. I think it's particularly important that offenders are not overlooked as people who need rehabilitation in this particular instance. While, of course, we want to take action to prevent these sorts of instances from happening and protect victims, offenders should actually, if they do feel remorse, take efforts at reparation, ensure that further action in this regard is not taken so that they don't repeat these sorts of offenses. We want them to start changing their attitudes towards women, towards sex, and very importantly, we want them to then take that further by starting to empower other men with those same attitudes of gender equality, of respect for the rights and needs of women, and to ensure that these sorts of acts aren't perpetrated. If they want to take a meaningful role in their own recovery and the recovery of others, they need to spread that message far and wide, so we develop a wider societal attitude of respect for women to prevent this from happening.
Okay. Now back to you, Mara. How many such incidences have you come across, and how prevalent is this in South Africa?
Every day 3 women are killed by their intimate partner. That's a South African statistic. In terms of our statistics, I couldn't even tell you. It's thousands upon thousands. We literally receive thousands of calls every year. The difficulty is that people are afraid when it's happened. They're ashamed. I know, I experienced the same thing, so I understand it. You feel like you did something wrong. And in fact, we need to be a society that reinforces exactly what my colleague has said here, that we respect women and the right to say no. And the part that people don't understand about is, when can I say no? You can invite someone over to your hostel room. They can be lying in bed with you and you can change your mind. It's your right, it's your body. And so we need to reinforce people's rights over their own body. We are a country where life is very, very cheap. And so rape, unfortunately, until we re-educate our country, will continue. And I'm saddened by that, because I really do this work because I want to see so many people become well and face a life. Because I just want to say to all of you ladies out there, there is life for you after your injury, because I'm calling it an injury because it will be with you for the rest of your life. But there is life after you've been raped and abused. Get the right help, get the right psychology, your psychological counseling. Speak out about what happened to you, because really I spent so many years feeling ashamed of what had happened to me. As soon as I started to speak out, my healing became greater, because it's not my fault that it happened to me, that a person made a wrong decision. I can't carry the blame. So I'm urging all the women that are watching me today to speak out. Go and tell someone. If you haven't told, go and tell someone. If you need help, call, phone the station. They'll give you our numbers. We'll help you, because actually there is a tomorrow, even though it seems like it's dark today. Remember, you're not alone. There are many people out there. Look at the success of these marches that we had. We took part in the march on the 1st. I was proud to be there. I wasn't proud for the reason we were there, but I was proud because so many women have decided we will stand up for what's right in our country. And I really believe, even though the situation that we're celebrating at Rhodes today is extremely heartbreaking, I feel that our country has turned a corner about gender-based violence just in this last week. August will be remembered as a Women's March month. We had the land-breaking march for the passes, and now we've had a land-breaking march against abuse, and our country is turning around. There is hope.
That's great. Now, Anthony, let's talk more about healing. When, God forbid, when a woman's raped, the one thing and the first thing she should do to heal is perhaps talk about it, find someone immediately, and open up about it?
Absolutely. The last thing we would want is for any victim of rape to feel isolated. We do understand that one of the most important long-term consequences of suffering rape is something called post-traumatic stress disorder. Even though a rape has been committed, the psychological effects last long beyond the actual act. The victim is forced to re-experience this over and over again, starts to experience changes in their beliefs around men and their relationships, and this can often lead to changes in relationships beyond that with the offender. If we start to allow this fact to kind of germinate in the psyche of someone who's suffered a rape, we start to see that they become isolated. And once isolated, we start to see depression set in, low mood, difficulty enjoying things, poor concentration, changes in eating and sleeping. And that kind of distress ultimately leads to a sense of hopelessness, which is precisely the reason that so many victims end up committing suicide. In order to prevent that from happening, we need people to be feeling safe that they can disclose to friends, family, universities, police, any relevant authority, that they don't have to feel alone in this and that they can access two particular forms of treatment. One, we do need to understand that there are specialized treatment facilities available for people who suffer rape. In fact, we've actually started to create free and highly accessible resources in this regard. Tears, War, Lifeline, SADAG all provide free counseling services in many respects to victims, as well as other forms of support. Friends and family members help. But what we always understand here is that treatment is always secondary to prevention. We want to create many means by which we can actually stop these offences from happening. And that's why these marches, it's why policy statements are becoming important, and it's why the measures created by institutions like Rhodes and NMU in these regards, by creating, I suppose, measures such as suspending offenders who have been accused of these instances before hearings take place, become important. Because what we want is to create a culture where there's no secondary traumatization. So once an initial trauma has been happening, what we want to make sure is that institutions respond appropriately by taking action. This reinforces a sense of being cared for by the victim. They also feel that there's a just outcome that's on its way, and this of course creates a whole different psychological outcome for someone. So by accessing these kinds of treatment interventions and by disclosing, we can actually allow for wider institutional change to help everyone who suffered.
Yeah, let's talk more about the professional help. Can you give us some insight into how that is given out, and how does the professional actually help the victim? What does the professional do? Take us through what the counseling feels like.
Absolutely. So there are standardized protocols for people who suffer trauma and rape in particular. Of course, as Mara's mentioned, the most important aspect of treatment is helping someone to deal with the distortions that might incur when we have a trauma. The primary distortion being survivor guilt and victim blaming. Oftentimes we find that somebody who goes through the sorts of trauma starts to blame themselves, saying that why did I allow him to come into the room? Did I lead him on? Was I sending mixed signals? And when we start to see someone internalize blame for their own victimhood, we start to see that they develop helplessness, hopelessness, and inappropriate guilt, which really kind of perpetuates depression. A big focus of treatment is helping somebody understand that they are not responsible for the actions of somebody else when they have been harmed, and that's crucial. The other things that are very important is processing the trauma. Very often when we've experienced the trauma, we start to experience what are called intrusion symptoms. We replay it over and over again, both in conscious waking hours and as nightmares. That's very important because the trauma starts to absorb all of our mental and emotional energy. It impairs our concentration, it reduces our sleep, which fundamentally undermines our well-being and our sense of efficacy in the world. We can't get through our daily routine. By processing a trauma in very specialized ways, looking at internal thoughts and emotional responses, by normalizing some of our responses in the situation, we actually help somebody to process out that trauma to reduce the intrusion. We also make sure that in treatment, we prevent avoidance behaviors. We do not want people to avoid situations, people, or even internal reminders of the rape, so that they don't feel that their world closes in, because of course those avoidances start to perpetuate the traumatic response a lot of the time. So when we start to break down all of those things, we start to help somebody better understand how they can move through this. The final stage of dealing with any trauma is the most crucial, finding meaning. Because what we should be defined by is not the traumas that we incur, but how we overcome them. And that's the most important and individualized part of treatment. Because when we start to find meaning in suffering and start to take actions where we feel that although we suffered, we can do good in the world for ourselves and others because of it, we start to find the most fundamental healing occurs.
I'm going to ask Mara the same question, but can you give us some instances where some people have, really recovered from these professional processes?
Absolutely. There have been many cases that I've had the privilege of being able to work with in terms of helping them to recover from these instances. In one particular instance that I'll remark on in this case, this person herself had actually found that because of the rape she encountered, she was later on able to immediately ensure that her sister, who had suffered some other similar form of sexual assault, was immediately treated and helped. The meaning she started to cultivate from what she'd been through is because she could empathize what happened with what happened with her sister, and because she knew what it meant to be able to achieve that help, she was able to be there for somebody she loved and help them recover while also ensuring that she was protected and that the offender both incurred the right limitations but also was rehabilitated himself. So it's oftentimes because we've been victimized that we can become people who become protectors to others later on.
Okay. Mara, give us some success stories.
I absolutely agree with everything you said. Well, I'm a success story. I was abused, and that's why I started TEARS, and I found that most of my volunteers have come into close contact with abuse of some sort, either in their family, and they want to pay back to the community by helping others. And if you look at why people work in rape and abuse facilities, it's nearly always because they've either experienced it or within their family, because otherwise life does become meaningless. Am I existing to pay my bond? But that feeling of helping somebody else without reward is its reward in itself. And I could give you many examples of people that have recovered and gone on to help their families. But I would like to say that if you look at any of the big organizations in South Africa that deal with rape and abuse, the majority work with people that have had a previous traumatic experience, be it Rape Council in Cape Town, which is probably the most prominent organization, or Lifeline, with whom I work a lot around the country. Nearly all their workers have had some sort of trauma. Because I think one of the secrets of working in a foundation or an organization that helps abuse victims is to have a deep compassion for what they've been through, because a lot of times survivors act in an illogical fashion. So we have a saying in our office, when people are being a little difficult with us, that hurt people, and we will not hurt them back.
Okay.
So I believe I'm one of those success stories.
Okay. Mara, what can the men in society do to police other men?
I personally don't think men can police other men. What I think we can do is develop a better bystander attitude, which is speaking out in situations, which is what I think you mean. So if you're at a bar and somebody is hitting on a girl continuously, there are two options. You could either have a word with him, which might end up with a fisticuff, or you could champion the woman by saying to her, "Are you okay?" in a non-threatening way. "Do you need a lift home? Can I call you an Uber?" So I think we are bystanders that are silent. So it's to become a proactive bystander without...
Proactive bystander.
Yes.
I like that term.
Yes, it's a meaningful term because you're not a watcher. And I think what we do is we hear the people next door fighting and we do nothing. So what can you do? Do you want to open the door and get involved in a family fight? No. But what you can do is wait till you see somebody in the lobby, or lurk around the lobby till you see them. Make it a conscious effort and give them your phone number and say, I heard there was something going on. I didn't want to interfere in it, but if you need any help, here's my number, here's the body corporate's number. So that's an active bystander, because whilst we are passive and we watch people doing bad things, they will continue to happen. But then it's not monitoring. You're not taking the responsibility for someone's actions. You're taking the responsibility for your own actions.
Okay. And Anthony, finally, can you take us somehow into the psychology of a rapist and the warning signs women should look out for?
Absolutely. We do understand that when it comes to offences like rape, there's no singular profile or motive. In fact, motives are, more often than not, are multifaceted. Very often we find that people who commit rapes do characterize all of those offences by power, sadism, and aggression. It's very, very important to understand that very often times it's not always about sexual attraction, it's more about the fact that they like to instill a sense of control over victims. When we start to notice controlling behaviors and possessive behaviors, this can indicate something more benign, but very often it can also indicate something more problematic. When partners start to demonstrate behaviors like isolating you from your friends and your families, this is incredibly disturbing and a huge warning sign that everyone should be aware of. We should never allow partners to isolate ourselves from valued supports because, of course, this can lead to worse issues. When we start to see extremely controlling and jealous behaviors, when aggression starts to seep through in instances where your partner doesn't seem to feel in control, this is also a warning sign that we should be wary of. Early signs of aggression are particularly important because whether there is aggression and reparation thereafter is irrelevant. Aggression should not be a feature of the relationship at all, at any point. So even if they do take efforts to repair, we should be wary about repeat instances in this particular regard. And finally, it should be understood that most rapes, as we say, are committed by intimate partners. So the people we need to be wary of are oftentimes those closest to us, so that we don't feel that just because somebody loves us, they're not capable of harm towards us.
Right. All right, Anthony.